and welcome. Parliament is currently holding public consultations on proposed amendments to the Electoral Act. And tonight we've invited the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Mohammed Salim, to discuss some of these proposed amendments, as well as some of the issues that are coming out or suggestions that are coming out from the public consultations. Mr. Salim, good evening and welcome.
Bula, it's good to be back.
Thank you for joining us this evening. So let's get right into some of the proposed amendments. One of the amendments that's talked about a lot is the inclusion of party symbols in the national candidates list. And with that amendment, what information will be reflected in the candidates list as well as the voter information booklet?
Well, thank you, Ziad. I think this is one of the most critical amendments to the Electoral Act, and it introduces the party symbol in the voter instruction booklet as well as the national candidates list. As you would be aware that in the last two elections, when a person went to vote, they would receive a booklet that has the number, the name and the photo of the candidates contesting the election. And there were a lot of the times when people were saying, I would like to know the parties that they represent so that we can make the decision as well more properly. So in the bills that are now before Parliament, the party symbols are now included in that list, so a person can easily refer to the booklet and the party that they wish to choose as well. This is also going to bring the electoral system that we have more consistent with normally what you see with similar electoral systems over the world, whereas it's a party-based system. So finally now in the electoral framework in the polling station level as well, you will be able to identify your candidate based on the party.
Now, we understand that in the past election, we saw that the median age for voters was quite average at around 27 or 28, if I'm not wrong. But we're still not discounting the fact that we have an aging population as well. Now, with the elderly in mind, what measures are currently in place to assist elderly voters or persons with disabilities?
Yeah. In terms of persons elderly and the persons with disability, it has already been a long-standing norm in the last two elections that people will give them way in the queue so that they don't have to stand for long, and they can make their way right up to the polling place, to the door, and they'll be allowed entry as a priority, simply because out of the respect that we have for those individuals. In addition to this, as you are aware, in 2018, Fiji ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And following that ratification, the law in Fiji was also passed by Parliament. And in this case, the law says that the convention actually says that a person with disability has the right to vote, and they may do so by the assistance of person at their own choosing. And now the law is being amended to include that as well. So that's for persons with disabilities. The law is being amended to allow them to vote through a person of their own choice. Now, for the elderly or persons who are unable to walk up to the polling station, or they are bedridden, or they are in a vehicle but they cannot get off the vehicle to conveniently walk to the polling station, the law is now allowing, specifically it is now in the law, it was already a procedure but it's now in the law. The law is allowing the presiding officer to take the ballot box and a ballot paper and the voting screen, the cardboard voting screen, to the person in the car as long as they are within the 300-meter boundary, and they can vote from within the car. So this will be done once the queue is ended. I mean, we cannot remove a ballot box from the polling station with 20 people still in the queue. So a little bit of understanding is required in this area. However, the person, if they are able to come to a polling place in a car or in a transport, the presiding officer now is legally able to, obliged to actually take it to the person at the vehicle or wherever they are, however they've come.
Just to clarify, Mr. Salim, does this mean that those who are elderly and require assistance, a person of their own choosing or someone from the polling venue to assist them to go and cast their vote, does that mean that they'll be given first priority to cast their vote?
Okay. In terms of assistance, persons with disabilities are allowed to choose a person of their own choosing. Elderly citizens or illiterate citizens who may need assistance, or any person who may need assistance in voting, will get that assistance from a presiding officer. and that will be provided to the person in the presence of another election official. That is to make it very clear. And in terms of the priority, the priority in terms of the queue is given by practice. It is given out of respect to allow them. Pregnant women are also given that priority to be able to vote before the rest of the able-bodied persons.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go to a break at the moment. When we come back, we'll discuss, because we started off the discussion on people who may not be able to easily access polling stations and vote on that same day. So we'll carry on that discussion on pre-polling and election day voting when we come back from our break. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're with the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Mohammed Saneem. Mr. Saneem, this year and even last year in democracies around the world, in the context of a pandemic, when they had elections, we saw the importance of having good pre-polling infrastructure and systems in place. Could you explain to us the difference between pre-polling and election day voting in our country, and what preparations are being made to conduct pre-polling in the next elections?
Thank you. In terms of the Fijian context, pre-polling is only limited to persons who live within designated areas. The decision to conduct pre-polling is largely determined by the remoteness, the accessibility, as well as other logistical constraints that may be there. For pre-polling areas in Fiji, mostly the islands and the highlands, the Fijian Elections Office will continue to run elections as we did in the last two elections. So if an area was subject to pre-polling in 2018, it will again be subject to pre-polling in 2022. That makes it certain for those people to know that they will be voting in the election before the election day, and as we did in 2018, 2022 elections pre-polling will still be 1 week before the election day. Now, in terms of early voting, if you want to vote early, which is what I think you meant for other countries, the only possible way to do early voting is by postal. Postal ballot applications can be made, and the postal voting will open on the day the election date is announced. So if you want to vote early in the election, that is the option available to you. We will not allow you to come and vote in a polling station simply because you may not have your name listed in that polling station.
Mr. Saneem, let's look at an area of contention for quite a lot of people. They had been discussing this during the elections and also post-elections as well, the clarifications on the start and end of campaign periods. Now, there's been an amendment that has been proposed to the law. Could you clarify this?
Yes. So previously, when we had elections, the definition of campaign period was not there. So the National Federation Party started its campaign 18 months before the general election date, whilst other parties started late, and so it was not sure as to when campaign was officially going to be campaign. And in that regard, the law also was not able to facilitate any kind of campaign rules to be applicable, meaning the campaign that was happening prior to the elections period was not governed under any law. So you will note there were various cases in court in which the court said because the election date is not known, it is not classified as campaign. So what the law is now being done is a specific period is being designated as the official campaign period. This is going to start in April next year, 1 year before the first possible, 1 month before, 1 month before the first possible day the writ can be issued, and it will end 48 hours prior to election day. That is your official campaign period. During the official campaign period, the campaign rules and the laws on campaign and the prohibited actions on during campaign are enforceable. So that is the period. It's roughly 6 months plus 1. So that's the period, yes.
This amendment also includes penalties for campaign-related offences, and we're just trying to find out what are some of the things that would constitute a breach.
Yes. So first of all, bribery. Bribery is a breach of the campaign provisions. Also coercion, that is a breach. The creation of fear, intimidation is also a breach. So things like this. And these are things that happen in Fiji, and we have had prosecutions in these regards. And that is some of those risks during the campaign period. So if the election is going to take place on the very first day that it should take place, which is the 9th of July, a person who wishes to contest in the election will officially have from April 2022 until the 7th of July to campaign. So you are guaranteed that period.
If I may digress just a little bit, of course, when it comes to politics, when there's election cycles, there's always this expectation of a smear campaign or slanders. Is there going to be any provisions in place to prevent this from happening, to help for a freer and fair campaign period as well as elections?
Yes, this is absolutely necessary in Fiji. We have a chronic problem of what I call engineered disinformation. Engineered disinformation to the extent that new claims arise 5 years, 4 years after an election. The most current one is where we have this person in the Fiji Times on the Monday, where this person claimed that the results in the 2018 elections from Wailotoa was different from the one that she had apparently counted. And then we had to establish the real evidence and the facts, and we found out that firstly the person was not even involved in the election in 2018. Secondly, the results are an explicit reflection of the data that we had collected in that polling station. So time and again opportunists come up and they make these claims. We have some very popular people who are, what I should say, misinformation gurus. They like to rile people up. They seem to be attacking every side, left, right and center. But this is what is the problem. And there is a section in the law now that is being introduced, section 144A of the law, in which the Supervisor of Elections will have the authority, the ability to direct someone to correct an information that is incorrect. And that is for the protection of the public. In 2018, someone made up a post and said the National Federation Party, when it comes to Parliament, will remove Diwali. And there was no powers to the SOE, or for anybody for that matter, to have Facebook remove that post and the person to also remove that post. You can hear National Federation Party raise this matter on numerous occasions. But now, this is a provision in the law where the Supervisor of Elections can direct the person to do it. It's an obvious misinformation. Right. So that's what the provisions is bringing in.
So we'll go to a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss more proposed amendments to the Electoral Act. So stay with us.
Welcome back. Mr. Saneem, from where we had left off in the previous segment talking about engineered disinformation, as you had said, or misinformation, you had some comments left. If you'd like to continue.
Yes. In terms of the provision that is now being introduced, the provision has some checks and balances. The first checks and balance process is that if someone disagrees with the statement with the directive of the supervisor, they can refer the same to the Electoral Commission for its decision. The law requires the Electoral Commission to respond within 24 hours. And the decision of the Electoral Commission binds the supervisor. So if the Electoral Commission says, no, this is all clear, then so be it. But the provision also has the powers given to the supervisor to be able to direct, say for example, a media organization that is running an ad which has misinformation, right? To be able to direct that organization to remove the ad. If there is a billboard, for instance, that has got misinformation on it, that has to be taken down. There is no point leaving it up there and waiting for the whole process to end. So that's one. The other thing is, there's been some discussion around what constitutes an offense in this regard. So let me clarify. The offense is where someone who has been directed by the supervisor to remove, Electoral Commission has also agreed with the supervisor, but the person fails to do it. That's when the offense is created. It is not simply an offense if you put, as they are currently putting it out to be. It's not an offense that, oh, there was misinformation. Supervisor said remove it, I removed it, now I'm going to be charged. That's not the way. It's going to be if you fail to remove it, then you will be charged. If the supervisor refers you to FICAC in the first place, yes.
Since you said that, there's also concerns about the fact that you are the Supervisor of Election and also the Registrar for Political Parties. Yes. Now, regarding the demarcation of the two roles, could you please clarify?
Well, simply speaking, there hasn't been any conflict between the two roles. And it's not a situation where there has been a problem because a decision had to be made by the registrar and an alternate decision has to be made by the supervisor. It is very much like a situation where somebody is looking after the entire, let's take the role of a referee in a soccer match. The referee's role is to keep the time as well as to officiate the match. Similarly, in the game, as you can say, elections, the registrar of political parties looks after the registration, funding and conduct and disclosures of political parties. They are the main contestants in the election. So there is no duplication of the role. There is no conflict in between the two roles. It is simply the same task that the supervisor is undertaking. So whilst the supervisor looks after the nominations process, which comes from the political parties who are registered under the Registrar of Political Parties powers. Now, the critical thing everybody fails to say is that under the law, the Supervisor of Elections is the Registrar of Political Parties. What parties tend to do all the time is split it. They always want to say, oh, he's only the registrar for this purpose. He's not the supervisor. I'm sorry, it is the same thing. If the letter comes from the supervisor, it is still as effective as if it had come from the registrar because the law says it's one person.
So let's move on to discussing party funding. There's a few issues that we'd like to discuss here. Let's first talk about the process and administrative requirements of financial disclosures, yes, or party funding disclosures. So how best can you justify the current processes as well as the amendments that are being made in this area? And are you working with political parties to make it easier for them to comply with these requirements? Because that's what these parties are saying, that there's too much red tape around these areas, and are you working with them to ensure compliance?
Thank you, Ziad. If I may divert to an example-based answer to this. When a political party contests the election, the intention is that the political party will win the election and form government and govern the country. For a country like Fiji, our income as per the last revenue disclosures is roughly $1 billion to $3 billion. That's a lot of money. Then to manage this money, the political party will have complete control based on the rules that are there. The rules for managing that $1 billion is 100 times more than the small number of requirements which is common to nearly every kind of institution in the country. So when one says, I cannot meet with these requirements, what is your capacity to manage the $1 billion budget? That's a demonstration of your strength. If your accounts are in order, that means you have demonstrated your capacity. Now, this doesn't mean that, oh, that statement is political. The supervisor shouldn't say that. In fact, these questions are necessary. It's a patriotic question in the first place. So I saw in the consultations, one party said, oh, we have so many members that give $2 each. Why can't you keep a register of the $2 that you receive? If you keep a register of the $2, that's only how then the member who gave $2 will know my money was used by the party. If you don't record that in the first place, you don't disclose that again, then how do you speak about transparency? The houses that talk about the transparency in the management of the national funding must demonstrate the capacity to manage their own houses. I give you examples. We have one political party that did not, well, we have a lot of political parties that did not keep receipt books. One political party doesn't have receipt books. So I'm looking at the $1 billion and this party is contesting the election. I'm just doing the analogy. Then we have another political party that could not disclose how they received all the money. And this also created a lot of confusion around, okay, what was income, what was not income. And then we had one political party that couldn't maintain all the records. They couldn't find their records. And when we started verification, so these problems arose. And the simple fix to it is, okay, political parties receive their own funding. These are the set of rules. We'll help with some more explanatory notes on the rules. They prepare their accounts. They publish it themselves. It will show, one way, it will show that the parties are self-sufficient, self-reliant. And secondly, the fact that the party itself does an audit. We'll not talk on the veracity of the audits that we have so far, but if the party itself has audited its accounts and it is confident about those accounts, it should be able to publish it itself.
Right.
From 2014 till now, none of the parties have voluntarily published their funds or their audited accounts, say on their social media. They haven't done it. Everything else is on social media except their list of the donations maybe, and also the audited accounts of the party. So,
And why do you think that they haven't done this yet?
I will not make any speculation on that, but let me say that there is a general expectation that if you are expecting that there is transparency in the management of funds on all parts of on all facets, you should start with yourself as well.
So we'll go to a short break, and when we come back, we'll carry on the discussions on party funding. Stay with us. Welcome back. Political party funding is one of the most widely discussed issues when it comes to elections in Fiji. And that's our subject of discussion at the moment with the Supervisor of Elections. There's been a lot of speculation, there's been a lot of discussion on, certain political parties receiving large amounts of donations in violation of the current, Electoral Act. Would you like to provide clarity on that as well? And after that, we'd like to also discuss the use of state resources during the campaign period.
Yeah, I think the donations aspects of political party funding came about when we started this verification exercise last year.
Right.
The reason why we started the verification exercise last year was simply because we've had 5 years of functioning of political parties. We've had 2 elections under the current framework. They have had time to familiarize themselves with the system and improve on their reporting of their finances. So late last year, under the FEO's strategic plan, we embarked on the verification of donations for political parties as well as the audited accounts. And you are aware of the rest of the story that follows in terms of the gaps that were there. The key thing that I have to say is that the donations that the parties are receiving are not being recorded properly. Somehow the parties have come up with these, the few things that I want to mention. One, it is incorrect to think that a candidate of the party is not an agent of the party. In fact, the candidate of the party is what makes the party. So if a candidate is receiving funds before the election, they declare it within 14 days from the issue of the writ. But there was a gap in the law. We didn't know how much money the person raised for the election after the nominations were approved. So now the law has said you will declare 30 days after the results are announced, after the election date actually. So we get a figure before and we get a figure after. There are sometimes, when you are in the position where I am, other parties come and tell you, that person did a fundraising dinner and collected $26,000. Or someone comes to you and says, that person went around and collected $1,000 each from all the shops in this town. And then you see the declarations, it's not there. So that is important. Elections is not about the contest for is not only about the contest for the governing of the country. It's also supposed to be a demonstration of transparency, the accountability of the individuals contesting the election. So, one, yes, candidates for the party are responsible for declaring their income and expenditure before and after the election, simply because the public want to know what is the election expenditure. That is a critical question that we have to ask in Fiji. How much money does it take to contest the election? Some parties in 2018 were saying we don't have any money, we don't have any money. When I looked at their financials, they earned over $1 million or over $2 million. And there is questions around some monies that were spent but not declared also. So this is important. Second thing is in relation to the disclosures requirements is in terms of the benefits people receive. There are numerous occasions where complaints are lodged around, oh, this person made this much, or this person got this benefit. So that has to be declared. It is necessary for public to know. After all, you will be a person in charge of public funds. At the end of the day, that's what happens. So the process of elections should not be seen as one-way street. It is actually supposed to be where the person contesting the election can give sufficient assurances. It's a modern society. Right. So I find it amusing from seeing what's being on the standing committee submissions, where SODELPA members have gone out and are individually submitting, asking for removal of the disclosure clauses. I think they should be asking for more disclosure clauses so that they can assure people that the basis on which they stand for elections is built on transparent financial disclosure.
During the last elections, there was a lot of questions raised about the use of or possible use of state resources during the campaigning period. Now, regardless of whichever party is in power, I guess that's one of the issues that will always be there unless there are clear laws to deal with that sort of issue. So now, during the consultations, what sort of things are being heard from the public? What do people want in terms of amendments to the Act?
It's an absolute necessity that state resources are not used for campaign. In the last election, we had a situation where a former Prime Minister used the official vehicle to go to all the campaign sites. And I think it ran in the news as well. These are things that shouldn't happen. Political parties need to, those who are in power, those who have access to resources, to boost their own transparency standing, should publish on their own how they are going to manage themselves whilst they have access to these state resources. If it comes to through the law already says you can't use it, right? But it should be, we should go one step further and show the practice on how these parties intend not to use state resources. I saw Honorable Elvik Maharaj explain that for assistant ministers and ministers, if they have to go to a party event, they have to leave the official vehicle behind and they go in a taxi to the party event. So that's an example of what the parties can themselves put out to say, this is our party standing on how we will work through the caretaker mode.
Just to clarify, Mr. Saneem, looking at election funding, especially campaigning period for political parties, do the same caps apply as the last election period, or is there going to be an increase or a change?
It's the same. $10,000 is the maximum an individual can give to a political party in a year.
And this, of course, must be documented.
Of course. Political parties, we are working with them now to develop some guidelines, some receipt book designs, as well as other accounting practices that are common to all other NGOs and institutions, but not so common in political parties. So we would like the parties to now draw up their own finance manuals so that they can record these properly. One political party treasurer has told me that he's been trying to get the party to do it over so many years, but it's not happening. And we saw various discrepancies in that party. So these are in-house issues that the General Secretary of the party, the registered officer of the party must first focus on, and then be able to convince the rest of the public that the party has strong footing in terms of financial management and its accounting. And
for the benefit of the public, failure to comply with this would result in?
So there are penalties for non-disclosure. The current law now says that the party will compile its financials and publish it. And if it doesn't publish it, it has 30 days grace period to rectify that issue. However, for that 30 days, for every day of non-compliance, they will be charged a $100 fine. However, if they don't comply within that 30 days, then the party will be deregistered. I think they have 3 months to get the accounts in order and publish it, and after that they still have this 1 month grace period subject to the fine. So all in all, 4 months to prepare financials. Geraldine, I think I should say some of the parties don't have very big financials to prepare. Fiji Labour Party has had 4 donations consistently between the 2014 to 2020 period. 4 people have been donating consistently for that party. So it wouldn't be an issue to create the financials for that many donations only and prepare the party's financials for disclosure.
So just 2 questions in relation to your response. So in terms of publishing the audited accounts as is a requirement, so the parties are saying that it's cheaper for them to disclose it on their website instead of publishing it in the national dailies, which can get quite expensive. Is this something that the Elections Office is on board with?
I think it's a good idea, but it would have carried more weight if they were already doing it and they could demonstrate that, see, so far we've been doing it and we have received this much attention to it. But until now it hasn't been done, so the Fijian Elections Office is also concerned at what is the reach of these websites.
We'll go to a break. When we come back, we'll talk about party sanctions. It's going to be our final segment. Stay with us. Welcome back. In one of their submissions, a political party said that sanctions should be proportional to the type of offence that's been created. And one of the political parties was deregistered because of certain issues, as we heard in the media a while back. And they're saying that deregistration is too harsh an offence for what they did. What's your take on the matter?
I think let's take the common sense approach. Political party is an essential component of a democracy. The essential component aspect is not only defined simply because you are part of the teams gunning for the victory. You have to also demonstrate your capacity to be in the game. And that is where you need to get in line with the norms that are now modern norms around democracy elections. In the case of a party that was deregistered was simply because the party failed to submit the accounts of the party within the requirements of the law during the election period. Now, if they didn't submit their accounts within that time and they went to contest their election, what is the safety net for the voters? What is the safety net for the voters? It's not selfish reasons that parties have to what they call survival. It's not that issue. The issue is here, interest of the voters outweighs anybody's interest in this electoral system. And in fact, it's quite shocking that the parties are asking for reduction in some of these transparency requirements, the accountability requirements. It's actually shocking. I've seen a lot of the standing committee submissions by parties. It seems like a pre-planned exercise by all the parties to go there and speak. But the simple things that they've asked for is such as the reduction in the transparency requirements doesn't improve the level of democracy we have, but is actually deteriorating it. So if you have to contribute to the growth of the democracy in this country, there is certain norms that you have to improve on and not go backwards as some of those requirements are asking. The other point that I wanted to make in this regard is the Fijian Elections Office has always held a very open relationship with political parties when it came to disclosures and stuff. We have always been providing information, and the disclosures for the year 2020 are due at the end of this month. The audited accounts of all the parties. We've held various meetings with the auditors of all the parties. We've identified to them that there are some issues, and the auditors now have to deal with those as the parties prepare to submit the accounts. Now, till to date, despite having thousands and thousands of dollars of irregularities in the accounts, none of the auditors have qualified any of the party accounts to have any issues. So the Fiji Institute of Accountants is also looking into this. They are concerned. I mean, if I identify to you that a $400,000 deficiency is there in terms of the receipts versus the income shown versus the bank account, you'd jump. But the auditors haven't made any such findings. So it's a work in progress. It will improve and it will continue to improve.
So I think one of the underlying themes that comes out of that is that compliance, if you're doing everything according to proper procedure, compliance isn't that difficult. And when it comes to, especially, when we're talking about deregistration, this one particular political party was deregistered because of irregularities in one of the most fundamental things for a political party,
Yes.
the party constitution. So regardless of whether it's a small compliance issue or if it's a major issue, I think consistency doesn't really mean that you forgive minor offences and then you take it.
I mean, I just build up from what you've said. Let me just say for the record that the accounting practices that the parties have to follow don't have to be drawn up now. The accounting practices that they follow are based on accounting standards from history.
Right.
It's not that it's something new that Saneem said, now make a new receipt book. Sorry, the receipt book practice has been there from the time accounting actually started, I would assume. That's how you can qualify income. So these are not things, if the parties come to you and say, we don't really know how to comply, go to an accountant. Go to an accountant, go to an accounts consultant, someone who can tell you how to prepare records, how to maintain records, and simply do that exactly. And most of the parties have qualified accountants as treasurers. It's actually in the constitution. A person may be a treasurer of the party, but must contain qualifications in accounting and financial management. So this is, if they have the qualifications, they have the person already there, the expertise, it's a simple matter of their intention, the willingness to comply, and that's what we need the parties to demonstrate. I'm not here to nitpick on a party, but it's simply asking the parties to demonstrate that capacity.
Mr. Saneem, if we could look at the blackout period, there were quite a lot of concerns by even Fijians and members of political parties regarding the blackout period. Let's look at the amendment that's been proposed in the bill to allow the Supervisor of Election to remove any remove or direct any political party, candidate or police officer to remove any materials that is in breach of the campaign rules. Now, this is social media, and realistically speaking, how would you be able to enforce that in that particular sphere?
Okay. So the first thing I must say is that enforcing the blackout period previously was like a toothless tiger. There were so many rules around the blackout period, but it was all to be prosecuted, and at the end of the day the court might find you 5 months later that you've breached the blackout period. The election is done and over with, there is a parliament, there is a government in power, but the rules for elections were breached. There was no, when you are in the election mode, you must have a situation where you should be able to take immediate action, because the election is only done in a matter of 50 days. And any decision that has to be made, any action that has to be reprimanded must be done within that time. You can't have it 5 months later. In Papua New Guinea, the election petitions from 2013 are still in court. So what will happen if the court decides the person will win the petition? Similarly in Fiji, if someone has breached the blackout period rules, they were to be prosecuted. I have no problems with them being prosecuted. They have their right in court, they can do that. But the protection of the process is in terms of removing that material there and then. If there is a banner and that banner breaches the blackout period rules, the supervisor can direct either the person who put the banner, because their names will be on the banner, a police officer, or any election official to remove the banner. Now, if they don't follow the directive, then the person who didn't follow the directive itself is liable for prosecution, right? But the person who put the banner up is also liable for breaching the blackout period rules. That is necessary. Yes.
We've had a lot of interesting discussions. Of course, so many things we would like to mention, but we hope to have you back some days so that we can actually finish our discussions. But thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Pinaka.
And that's all we have for you on the show tonight. We hope this was informative for you as well. Have a good evening.